to be chairing. And our first speaker is Kyu Hyu Park, whose topic is Don't You Have Nunchi, Korean Interlocutors Mind Reading in a Relevance Theoretic Approach. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Maria. Yes, I'm going to talk about nunchi, which is an important concept in Korean language and culture. And I'm trying to connect this one to relevance theoretic approach. Okay, so my research objective is to understand nunchi in a relevance theoretic approach. Because nunchi and Korean language is underexplored in relevance theoretic approach. So I'm trying to expand the application of the relevance theory and also try to explore when Korean people see nunchi and explained how Korean people see nunchi in an account of relevance theory. So this is what Hong's book started with. She published the book titled Power of Nunchi, and she suggested one example. Like, let's imagine you have just started a new job in a big company. Oh, yeah. And you're invited a party where you want to make a great impression. When you walk into the room, everyone is laughing a bit too hard at the not particularly funny joke of an old woman you've never seen before. So in this case, what would you do? So Hong's suggestion was that she think that B might be good, but C is the best option. So she thought that find a tactful moment to introduce herself to the older woman must be the best option. But as a Korean, I was doubtful about her choice because Hong is Korean American, so she might have different perception about nunchi. So I instantly have some informal survey on my social network services, and 74 Korean were born and raised in Korea and work for Korean companies provided mixed responses. And they said 71% of the participants indicated that they would choose option B rather than option C. Why? There must be two major reasons. The first one is that they don't want to be in the group and they want to behave as same as their group members do. And also the second one, they think they may not be allowed to speak someone on the higher position. So for this cultural constraint, they mostly chose option B is the great one and having nunchi. So what is nunchi here? Then the literal meaning of nunchi is eye measure or sense of eye. And Kim and Kim said nunchi captures what is hidden between the lines of the uttered words by observing and feeling the air of the scene without explicit verbal and nonverbal cue. So this definition very much sounds like where pragmatics can be involved in. So it can be a little bit complicated concept, but just simply saying nunchi understands what others need. And if you have nunchi, it understands what others feel, but it's not necessarily experience empathy. So we can compare this with Baron Cohen and Will Wright's mind reading. Baron Cohen and Will Wright's mind reading has two main aspects. So the first one is cognitive empathy, the ability to recognize and understand what someone else is thinking or feeling. And the second one is affective empathy, the ability to have an appropriate emotional response to someone else's mental state. In the case of nunchi, it is related to cognitive empathy rather than affective empathy, because even though we understand, even though we recognize what others feel, but we don't really have to respond to their emotional feelings. So He et al. Made some types of nunchi. So they divided into two areas of nunchi. So the first one is existence of nunchi. So if you have nunchi, it means that one behaves properly, responding to others' feelings and intentions. And also there's different, a little bit different, but also important concept is that to have quick nunchi. So one has a higher level of nunchi. So nunchi is not everyone has the same thing, but like the pragmatic understanding, the degrees of understanding, it is also related to the levels of nunchi. So someone has higher level of nunchi and the others might have lower level of nunchi comparatively. And there is also another category is behavior. So we say we look at nunchi. So it is mostly negative connotation. So even though, so for example, at home, my husband and I have a equivalent position. Still, if I do something wrong with him, then I can see nunchi of him because I did something wrong. But take care of nunchi is a little bit different. So take care of nunchi can have both positive and negative things. So it is just more like a daily life thing. So even though I didn't do anything wrong or whatever situations, we just take care of nunchi all the time. And giving nunchi to others is a little bit different. Sometimes the older people or people in higher social positions usually give nunchi to the younger or lower social positions. But sometimes it can be done between friends. If you feel like someone has some in the sad situation and the other did not see nunchi of the sad friend, then we can give her nunchi about the sad friend. So so that's how I started my research, that nunchi processing might be quite similar to the pragmatic processes in our understanding. So I used Ho and Park's nunchi scale to measure nunchi. As you all recognized, it is really difficult to measure nunchi, but they tried. So initially they defined nunchi as the ability to understand the mind of the other person or the situation one is in and take appropriate actions that fit the mind of the other person or the situation one is in. So they divided two areas, like just like before, existence of nunchi or behavior of nunchi. So they initially collected 189 items from previous literatures, and then they evaluated the 189 items. So based on the participant selection, 77 items out of 189 items as selected that it reflects nunchi well using Likert scale. And then 4 psychologists and counseling experts selected 14 tentative questions. And the questions include individualism and collectivism, high context communication, and self-esteem, and satisfaction with life, empathy quotient, and interpersonal relationships. So in the tentative questions, those aspects were also included to measure as well, because they can be an important part of nunchi as well. And then they did some factor analysis and they ran some reliability test. So finally they got 12 items only after the several tests. So Ho and Park's model has been the long-term model for nunchi scale, but Robertson pointed out that there must be a burdened nunchi, which is a negative aspect of nunchi, often thought to place much greater burden on those with less power or status in social hierarchies. So for example, a graduate student must mind or watch her nunchi much more carefully than her senior graduates or professors need to. So Moon and Moon accepted Robertson's criticism, and they expanded Ho and Park's nunchi scale and included a burden nunchi, which is a dysfunction of nunchi, as Ho and Park only talked about the positive side of nunchi. So based on Moon and Ho and Park's nunchi scales, I redesigned the questionnaires. So I recruited 56 undergraduate students who are native speakers of Korean from a university in Seoul, South Korea. And then I mixed the questionnaires, eliminated redundant questions. So as a result, I got 16 questions, so 14 questions and 2 control questions. And so the first and last questions were the control questions. And I made the discourse completion tasks. At first, Moon and Holland Park's nunchi scale only, it was about the Likert scale. So the questions was like, do you make others comfortable like this? But to understand nunchi processing, I didn't think that's enough. So I created discourse completion tasks. So based on their nunchi criteria, I made some contextual situation. And then after the participants finished the part 1, then part 2, they reflected on their personal responses in part 1. So they rethought about why they said like that in the first questionnaire. And part 3, I also used Likert scale evaluations as well, but I'm not going to talk about this right now because Likert scale evaluation, the result was everyone thinks they have great nunchi, so it was not really significant. So the questionnaire process, like as I said, so they got 16 scenarios. So ask about what would you say and or during each situation. So for example, question 6, your friend who was studying at the cafe with you suddenly closed the book and went silent. What would you say and or behave? Or you are working part-time and have observed a manager scolding your colleagues before leaving. So these kind of questions. So the participants imagined themselves they are in this situation and they answered the questions here. After finishing them, I gave them the part 2 questionnaire, so which is ask about do not change your responses in part 1 and provide a reason why you would say and or behave as indicated in your responses. So for example, participant 13 said in questionnaire 4, your grade has decreased rapidly compared to before. You see your professor accidentally in the hallway and professor says something personal is going on these days. So in part 1, the participant 13 said, there are always a lot, professor, how have you been? In the part 2, they rethought about their response in part 1. So they say, I didn't study and the professor is aware of it. So I wanted to change the topic like this. So as a result, excluding the responses to control questions, there were 14 types of imagined interlocutors. So there are 5 with the scenarios with friends and 2 with scenarios with professor and 1 with coworker or line manager in a part-time role and senior student and 4 scenarios related to team setting and 1 scenario related roommate. So this is the result, but I'm going to just talk about the highlighted part. So the situation 3 was talking about friend A talks about friend B. So at the time, most participants felt like the friend A's talk about something negative about friend B. So they actually made responses which implying rejecting what friend A say. Sometimes they say directly, pointing out friend A's talk behind friend B, but they also try to make indirectly say they want to reject the talk about friend B when friend B is not there. And situation 6, it is about a friend studying together suddenly closed a book and went silent. At the time, most participants answered that they suggest something for their friends. And also situation 10, a friend seemed to want to talk in the group, but the friend did not get a right timing, so could not talk. So at the time, they try to encourage the friend to talk in the group. And in the scenarios with professors, it was quite surprising result that about the situation too. A professor asked whether they had completed the group presentation after it had concluded. So professor in this discourse completion task, the professor asked about, well done. Have you done with your presentation? Is it completed like this? But all participants expected that the professor wants something from them. But they did not know what it is, but they thought that professors want something from them. And with the coworker line manager scenario, mostly they ignored this situation that the coworker at the part-time job was scolded by the manager. They ignored. 25% people ignored it because they want to avoid the situation, because if they have a bad luck, then the line manager can also scold me. So they just ignore this situation. And also about the encouragement, they say they are going to encourage the coworker, but actually it was quite empty mind. So they did not really encourage the coworker with a really full-hearted, but they are just doing that to be polite. And also the fun point here is that 12% of the participants think about concern for their sake, because it is quite similar to ignorance. So ignorance also part of the thinking that they're not interested in the coworker scored it or not, because it is not their business. But concern is more related, partly also ignorance, related to that they don't want to lose their job, and also the coworker might done something wrong. So if the person did something wrong, then I have to do work more. So that kind of concern was the participants had in their mind. And with the scenario with senior student, so unlike UK, in Korean universities in Korea, sometimes the senior students has power over junior students. So if a senior student is scolding a classmate, my classmate who is junior, then they're going to keep silence, or they're going to firstly think about what is going on. Or sometimes they say they're going to arbitrate with the senior student to release the tough atmosphere. And also sometimes they're going to empathy with the classmate after the senior student leaving. But before that, they're going to keep silent. And the team setting. So situation 8, a group of friends plan a picnic and one of them suddenly says something weird. So at the time, the majority of them said they're going to ignore what this person said. And also in situation 9, during the preparation for a group presentation, one participant appears excessively anxious, trembling their hands and struggling to speak. At the time, most likely they're going to encourage the person. And also in situation 13, everyone voices their ideas, yet no one listens to others during the group meeting. At the time, they're going to solve the problem, so they're going to suggest something to solve this messy problem. And the roommate scenario was a roommate talks about the perfume 2 days prior to their birthday. Well, the interesting point here is that 62% people, some participants know what they want, because other people, especially the participant who selected, they're going to buy the perfume for their roommate. They understand this utterance and this situation that roommate want me to buy the perfume, but the 62%, some participants, they recognize that the roommate wants to me to buy a perfume that they're not willing to purchase for them. So it means that they understand what they mean by nunchi, but it is their selection, the behavior is the selection that is quite significant. So like you may all know about relevance theory, so I argue that nunchi processing is similar to relevance guided comprehension heuristic, that they follow a path of least effort in deriving cognitive effects, and then they stop when their expectations of relevance are satisfied. So the constant patterns about the result is that the participants make assumptions about what their interlocutors want, regardless of the types of interlocutors. And also, if they think it is worth to process their processing effort, especially when they imagine to talk to their friends, unlike talking to the coworker, they think it is more worthwhile to process their effort. And also when they talk to their friends, they feel like they might have better understanding about their friends' abilities and preferences. So it is more easier to get the assumptions about the expectation of relevance of their friends. So so about the friends, when they imagine that they were talking to their friend, they're more likely to consider what their friends wanted or needed and to have comparatively more empathy. And they focused on the personal relationship with their friend, and they were more suggestive, but also rejecting what their friend said when they imagined that they were talking to the friend. So for example, again, when friend A talks about friend B, when B isn't present there, friend A say, don't you think B show off her boyfriend excessively these days? So the participant 34 said, I think she might find her true love. And in her mind, in the participant's mind, the friends try to talk behind B's back. So I want to avoid this. So like this. So this person shows that they want to make a good relationship between friend A and B, and also themselves to friend A and B. So trying to avoid hurting any personal relationship between three people here. And it is kind in between friends and team setting. So nunchi among friends is easily perceived due to their close social distance and the more generous allowance in the level of nunchi, which means even though my friend has a lower level of nunchi, but with the participants think that it might be okay, that person is just like that. Maybe, but in different contexts, it may not be allowed. So we can compare this with the part-time job place situation, because the participants, they are less likely to allow the nunchi situation. They don't think that it is not worth of their processing effort in understanding the situation with the colleague at a part-time job place, because they are not close enough. So for example, participant 17 said a group of friends is planning a picnic, but friend A suddenly in the group, this person say, have you thought about mice poos? So in part, the participant 17 say, shut up and stop saying shitty things. And the reason why this person say is because the friend says something weird and irrelevant. And also quite similar answer is that participants 4 said, don't join us, get out of here. So they just can point out what's wrong with their friends, the person like friend A, but also it's not just about the friend A, but they try to make harmony about the group conversation here. So that's why they said like this, because some participants think that they're planning something positive and something fun, but friend A said something negative about it and something less comprehensible thing. So they think that friend A actually heard the atmosphere about the fun, enjoying atmosphere. So that's why they saw nunchi of others and said like this. And
I
in the
hate
team
to
set.
interrupt, but you've got about
Okay.
2 minutes left, okay? Because we have to keep to the schedule, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. So in the team setting, it's quite, in this case, the participants tend to assume the expectation of relevance from the goal of the groups. So for example, if they have to do some group presentation, they can be their immediate goal in the group, unlike the individual conversation. And the professor and senior students one, this one was related to what Robert said about the burden nunchi, because hierarchy was important in seeing nunchi. So when the participants often cannot grasp the expectation of relevance of the professors or senior students, then they just choose to be silent because they don't want to share something personal with the higher position people, and they cannot grab what to say. So at the time, they just to keep silent, which is nunchi. So it is quite similar to the first example of Hong's example. So in the discussion, so the expectation of relevance is not only raised by the contextual, the communicator's ostension, but also it can be aggressive from the power of lexicalization, because Korean people usually say, if they don't have nunchi, then we immediately think they are really insensitive and they might be poor at their social activities. And also it is very much related to hierarchical culture. So if you're not aware of this social cultural factor, then you might fail to see nunchi as well. And also collectivist culture is one of the one related factor that because we want to be in a group and no one wants to be popped up from the group there. So we want to share the similar behavior. So the limit might be, it is difficult to measure
Afraid,
the.
could you just be concluding within the
Okay,
next
yeah,
minute
it's
or
a
so,
conclusion.
please?
So it suggests that just simply saying that based on the participants' assumptions, they infer their interlocutors' expectation of relevance by nunchi, and they do not decide to behave even though they see nunchi of others and recognize what they want or need, but it is their choice. So yeah, so I'm done here.
Thank you
So
very
thank
much.
you.
Thank you very much. The time is basically up, but maybe there is just enough time for one question. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question, a short one? I cannot see anybody. So let me thank Kyu Hyun for this very interesting talk. We have all been convinced that nunchi is a very complex phenomenon and certainly worth investigating. Thank you very much.